Quite a speech there from our president, talking about how freedom is not a gift from government, it is a gift from God. We heard him thank all of his supporters, a very enthusiastic crowd there at the NRA. We heard him talk about his accomplishments for them in terms of the Supreme Court, with Neil Gorsuch getting onto the court, putting Jeff Sessions in as Attorney General. And then, of course, General Kelly, Secretary John Kelly as head of Homeland Security. And some of the big themes there being, one, the protection of the Second Amendment. You heard all the historical references going all the way back to the Revolutionary War, the Founding Father, why we need our Second Amendment. And you also heard a lot of talk about that wall. He said the wall is happening. It's what we need, and it's something that he will do. Joining me right now for more analysis of what I'm calling a bit of a campaign speech there, getting the base all excited. Bullseye Brief founder and author Adam Johnson, conservative political commentator Gina Loudon, former chairman of the D.C. Democratic Party Scott Bolden, and Jan Morgan still with me. Jan Morgan, a big grassroots activist, someone who is a big Trump supporter, someone who has stood for the Second Amendment and made that her platform. I'll go to you first. What was your reaction to this?
You know, I was really glad to hear President Trump reaffirm to the people that he does believe that the right to keep and bear arms is a God-given right, not a government-issued privilege. But yet, and I was happy to hear him say that there would no longer be a federal assault on our Second Amendment rights. But what I didn't hear him talk about, Trish, that was really important to me and a lot of gun owners out there is this. On the state level, we have state governments still attacking our Second Amendment. Right there in Georgia, they're voting and trying to decide whether campus carry is going to be allowed. Here in my own home state of Arkansas, I just finished 2 weeks of major battles for gun rights at our state capitol. And in Alabama, the folks there are fighting for gun rights.
Yeah, I mean, that said, you're talking about some specifics here. I don't think this was a speech necessarily about specifics. I think this was a speech about saying, hey, you know, I'm here for you. I'm going to fight for you. And that's why I say in some ways it sounded a bit like a campaign speech. You know, very big themes, overarching themes, Gina, in there that he was wedging into this conversation. As I mentioned, going back to the Revolutionary War era. I mean, this is a tactic that I think plays very well.
Yes, and using the politically incorrect word God, which politicians are no longer allowed to say, I thought it said a lot to that audience who is, of course, his base. I was glad to hear him say something that we all know as Second Amendment advocates, and that is that when you take guns away from citizens, it leaves them in the hands of criminals. This is the most common sense, to me, narrative on this whole entire point of the Second Amendment. So I was glad to hear him say that. I was also really glad to hear him point to that the border issue is a national security issue, that we spend billions defending, billions on national security, but we don't protect our borders, and terrorists walk right through. I think those are two super common sense takeaways.
Adam Johnson here with us as well. What does this get him here? I mean, a speech like we just heard, what is the upshot of that?
He's effectively appealing to the base. He knew that he would have people supporting him there, members of the NRA. So that was effectively, to use one of his expressions, a no-brainer, right? But what he really did was pivot to a much broader commentary about putting conservative judges back into the Supreme Court, about strengthening the borders, about providing security. This was really framing the conversation as we go into tomorrow, his 100th day. And once again, Donald Trump has changed the narrative. Again, it's about appealing to that conservative base, and in many ways, I would say even hearkening back to Ronald Reagan, right? Remember that 1980 Morning in America? By taking us back historically to the Civil War, to the Revolutionary War, it's almost reawakening that notion of morning in America.
Yeah, I think it makes people nostalgic. I mean, obviously none of us were alive then, but you think about the country's founding. I, for one, was an American history scholar and spent a lot of time on the colonial period, Scott. And so when you hear these references, people are learning something. They're thinking back to the origins of our country and really how we've always believed fundamentally in limited government, how we believed in the power of the individual. You're laughing, but this is what he's conveying. This is what he's getting across to his base, that he's there to protect that.
He certainly is. I'm shaking and saying, woo, because that was hard. That was a hard speech for a Democrat to sit here and watch. I tell you, I have to admit that without a doubt. Let me just say this.
Why was it so hard?
Oh, it was hard because it was full of, you know, the issues that I identified as I listened to the speech where he used reasonable gun control 2 or 3 times, and there was no major applause for that. And here's the dichotomy between the Democrats and the Republicans and the NRA. The NRA wants no constraint on its Second Amendment.
Oh, you should be happy. You just said it was hard to listen to. He said reasonable gun control. That should make your day.
But here's the dichotomy. What is reasonable to the NRA and the Republicans and what is reasonable to the American people and the Democrats is a huge gap because the NRA opposes any type of narrowly tailored restriction whatsoever.
That said, I didn't ask you about the NRA. I'm asking you about the speech. What do you think this gains him? Why did he give the speech he gave?
I don't think it gained him anything. I think he wanted to get out, touch his base. It's empowered him, and this was a red meat speech to a base of supporters that are 1,000% behind him. It was a great time for him in regard to politics and as a campaign speech.
Yeah.
But Washington is waiting for him, and his pronouncements he's got to deliver results.
So this is important, though.
This speech did nothing.
You know, Washington is waiting for him, and he's basically, if you ask me, Jan, he's sending a message to Washington. He's saying, guess what? I got all these people out there, all these people that like me, support me. I'm talking their language. So for all you folks in Washington, all you Freedom Caucus members, all you conservatives that, you know, don't want to come around on things like taxes and health care, guess what? I'm here, I'm in charge, and all these folks are with me. Going over to Jan on that one. I mean, this is a message right back to Washington, D.C.
Yes, it is. And the fact that Scott has and other Democrats have so much trouble hearing a president who is supportive of the Constitution and Bill of Rights tells me that the Democrats still did not learn any lessons from why they lost this last election, which is good for us in the long run.
Do you feel like you still haven't learned your lesson there, Scott?
No, we've learned our lesson, but this gets him nothing in Washington. This is a feel-good speech for him, but when he gets back, he's got big problems. And I'll be honest with you.
But
I
it gets him everything in Middle America.
Well, that's right.
It gets him everything in Middle America, Scott.
Doesn't get him anything in regard to the House and Senate, and the House and Senate and White House are controlled by Republicans.
But Scott, the point we're making here, right, is that Middle America is with him. And so all those representatives from Middle America, they're watching this, they're seeing this, and they've got to get on board with his agenda or they risk getting booted out of office. So
but that narrative hasn't changed. That narrative has not changed in his first 100 days, and he's gotten zero done, at least as far as legislation is concerned.
Hang on, Scott.
He's gotten zero done.
Zero
as far
done?
as legislation.
You know that's not
Excuse
true.
me,
He's gotten executive orders, but he's gotten zero done legislatively.
He just put through, he just proposed the largest tax cut in history. He
has no bill.
He installed.
He has no bill.
Well, we're working on that. He installed a new member of the Supreme Court.
Yeah,
that's some serious accomplishment.
He
took on health care.
He couldn't even get 60 votes, and he couldn't even pass a health care bill.
All right,
he didn't even pass a health care bill yet.
We're gonna agree to disagree on this one. Scott, good to see you. Thank you so much, Adam. Always a pleasure. Gina, Jan, good stuff.